Hello. Hello, friends, everybody who subscribed to the channel. Thank you for subscribing. Today we are going to be watching some more animated horror stories. I watched an hour of it already that is on my YouTube channel. So you can, if you go to my playlist and you go to reactions, it's going to be in there. It's like the first hour of it. So, like, let's do another hour because why not? Ooh, let's see.
Our school began its classes after the long holiday of Christmas. The corridors were once again flooding with the laughter of young boys and girls. I was happy to see my best friend after a long Christmas holiday. We went to have lunch in the cafeteria and shared our experiences with our holidays. The school I study is one of the biggest schools in our city. We had long hallways, huge classes, and a wide playground. I often walked to school with my best friend Matt, who lives nearby my house. One day, when we were walking toward school, Matt pointed to a poster hanging on a nearby tree. It was a poster of a man. The headline read, "Wanted, dead or alive," and the bottom line, it mentioned, "Escaped convict." We discussed our entire way to school that this person had surely done something really bad for being on the list of a wanted criminal.
Immediately I'm like, they didn't put no calls out to, the families in the neighborhood, letting people know that there's a wanted criminal in the area by the school. Got a wanted poster by the school, got these kids seeing it, and y'all just over here letting him be free, not telling nobody. My mom would have kept me from school. Is the reason why I'm like, y'all didn't call school or nothing.
After reaching the school, our principal announced everyone to gather in the playground. A group of local cops was also present there. At first, none could guess what was going on, but then our principal told everyone that the cops are looking for a highly dangerous criminal, so we are being instructed to call 911 or tell our adults if we ever spot this guy. Also, the teachers became very conscious of every kid in school. They told our parents to come get us after school when possible. For those who travel alone, should go home in groups and not stay out after dark. I became a bit upset as I just got back to school and wanted to play basketball after school hours with my friends.
No.
Our coach canceled all our basketball practice for the alarming situation and shifted it to an early morning schedule. I am not an early riser, but for the sake of basketball, I scheduled my routine accordingly. The practice used to begin at 6 a.m. sharp, hence, being late resulted into punishments. Our school often pressurized on cleanliness and community services, so for those who came late into practices, were often given tasks such as swiping school corridor or working in the cafeteria or arranging books in library and so on. One night, Matt and I had a sleepover at one of our friends' house. We decided to play a video game before going to bed. Everyone planned to play for an hour as we had basketball practice the next morning. After an hour, Matt and my friend Jack went to bed, but I wanted to play a bit more. I told them I will wake them up at the right time so they don't have to worry about me. But in the morning, I obviously couldn't wake up on time. It was 6:30 a.m. when I opened my eyes. I realized my friends have already left for their practices, and I cursed them from my heart for not waking me up. When I reached the ground, I saw them warming up and laughing at me. I knew they played a hideous prank on me so they could see me getting punished. I ran to our coach and started to apologize. Though being one of the coach's favorites, the coach told me that I will be punished like everyone else. The rules are the same for everyone. Without arguing much, I agreed with him. The coach told me to clean the backside of our playground and get the tools from the school basement. The backside of our school ground was a popular smoking zone among the high school seniors, hence, it was dirty all the time.
I thought you said the school was focused on cleanliness and community service. That's a good area right there. All that damn trash.
Every day, our sweeper used to clean that area after school hours, and the next day, the seniors used to mess it up again. I put my backpack on the ground and walked towards the school building to get the tools from the basement. As I reached the school basement and opened the door, A dark hallway down the stairs stood in front of me. I slowly walked down and turned on the light switch underneath the passage. The basement is generally filled with school supplies, extra chairs and tables, and all other stationary stuff. The mop and bucket were kept in the corner, so I walked to get it. As I took the tools and was about to leave, I noticed a bunch of tattered clothes lying on the basement ground. There were a bunch of plastic water bottles lying beside them, too. The basement was not very tidy anyway, so I thought these are nothing but some old school junk. One thing that stuck in my mind is a foul smell of burnt tobacco. The smell was floating all around the basement. I told myself, someone might be secretly smoking here. But who can that be in this early morning? As I kept thinking, standing alone, I realized I am wasting my time and that I have to get back to the cleaning so that I can join the practice as soon as possible. I got upstairs and closed the basement door. One other weird thing I noticed is that the lock of the basement door was broken. I thought to let the coach know about it in case students are sneaking in to smoke there, which is really not safe because the school can catch fire if they leave burning buds down there. As I was walking towards the backside of the playground and saw Matt and Jack still making fun of me, I ignored them and went ahead.
Never sleeping over
The
that house
backside of our
again.
school playground is secluded, which is why it is a popular smoking spot among the students. All of our school garbage bags are kept here, so the place always carries a stinking odor. As I swept the burnt buds from the ground, I kept cursing my friends even more. The smell around me made me nauseous. Still, I kept on doing my job. I didn't realize what time it was, but I was almost done just when I heard something. It was coming from the corner where the garbage bags are kept. First, I thought it might be a squirrel or some small animal, so I dumped the dirt into a nearby dustbin and decided to head back to the playground. As I turned back and took my first step, I heard a terrible sound that heightened my senses and fear. It was the sound of someone eating vigorously, as if someone was munching food like a hungry dog. I looked back to see what was going on, and what I noticed made my heart skip out of my throat in fear. There was a guy sitting behind those garbage bags facing his back towards me. He was eating the rotten leftovers from the cafeteria from those garbage bags. I could see white worms crawling down his elbow as he put his hand inside those bags to take out those rotten foods. I know I should have been smart and ran to tell the coach about this guy, but I made a really dumb move. I called out to the guy and said in a broken voice,
What you say?
Hey, are you all right? You shouldn't be here. The guy suddenly stopped and looked back at me. I never knew what hell looks like, but when he looked at me, I felt what hell is. His eyes were red and white worms were hanging from his mouth. He was chomping a bad piece of half-eaten burger. I immediately recognized his face. It was the convict who broke prison. He suddenly got up and pulled a sharp knife from his pocket and said in a cold, horrifying voice, "I am gonna kill you, and then burn your body, and then eat you like these worms." I was beyond terrified. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The man started to walk towards me in a feeble way. I noticed his one leg was injured as he kept limping towards me. Luckily, my coach came to check on me, and as soon as he saw that guy, he too recognized him. He immediately jumped on that man and pushed me away. The man started to hit my coach, but he was too weak, and our coach is a strong, healthy man. He knocked that guy out with one single punch. I started to scream and call for help. All my friends came running and noticed the entire vicious situation. The cops were called immediately, and they came and arrested the escaped convict. Our school was searched thoroughly, and it came out that the guy broke into the school basement. He might have stayed the entire Christmas down there to save himself from the cold outside. The clothes that I saw were his. He injured himself while jumping the jail fences, which is why he was limping. Not just these. I read in the newspaper the next morning about his arrest. The man was convicted with charges of first-degree murder. He burnt his neighbor's house, and when the police got there, he was seen eating the burnt flesh from his dead neighbor's body. I am grateful that my coach didn't get hurt while saving me. The more I think about that day, the more I understand that he didn't just threaten me that day. He actually meant it. If my coach didn't come back to check on me, he might have done the same thing to me, which he did to his neighbor. I really hope he stays behind bars forever, and we never meet again. Come here.
No, thank you.
So this happened over the course of a year. In the fall of 2005, I moved into Goldstein Hall for my freshman year of college. Goldstein Hall was your typical 3-story dormitory, built in the 60s, and had seen better days. My room was your typical cinder block dorm. It wasn't very fancy, but it was home for the year. I quickly threw myself into the college lifestyle. Classes, sports, parties, and living on pizza. Things were normal at first. My roommate Alex was a very shy kid who liked computers and watching football games. But he was homesick, and he spent a lot of time at home. So I would get the room to myself. One day while typing up a paper on my computer, I felt a chill go up my back as my TV suddenly turned on. I was creeped out, but I tried telling myself that I must have accidentally hit the remote button, even though I knew it was on my bed. There were times I would hear knocks at my window, but nobody would be there. Or I would have my door open and see it slam shut, as though it had been hit with a gust of
Time to
wind.
go.
One day I came home to find my radio was on, even though I knew I had turned it off when I left for classes that day. I would see books being out of place, and there was this one time that my Phillies baseball cap, that I couldn't find for a week, suddenly appeared on top of my computer. Every once in a while, I would smell the strong smell of cologne in my room, despite the fact that I don't wear cologne, and Alex was almost never in the room.
The
Each
good
time
smelling
something
ghost.
weird happened, I always tried to explain it away to myself, with less and less success. The weirdest incident of that semester happened when Alex and I were sitting in the dorm, watching Thursday night football. When out of nowhere, our microwave came on for about 5 seconds, and then stopped. Alex and I looked at each other for a moment, not saying a word. Then we went back to just watching the game. He wound up skipping his Friday morning classes, and immediately went home the next day. The end of the semester came, and Alex decided that he was going to transfer out of the school. I wasn't too surprised, because I knew that he wasn't really into going here. After finals, I decided to be nice and help Alex load up his car. My family wasn't going to pick me up for winter break until the next day, so I had no problem with helping the guy move out. We had just finished packing up Alex's car in the parking lot, and we started to say our goodbyes, when Alex suddenly looked at me with a serious expression on his face. He then said, "I don't know how you can stand being in that room. You know what I'm talking about." I then let out a deep breath. "Yeah, I know. I'll be fine." We then shook hands, and I watched Alex leave Goldstein Hall for the last time. Luckily, nothing weird happened that night, and over winter break I managed to convince myself that I was just having an overactive imagination. The new semester started in mid-January of 2006, and I was excited for my new roommate. This time it was a guy named Matthew, who was redshirting for the football team. Matthew was pretty nice, although I didn't have a lot in common with him. Matthew stayed for about the first week of classes, and then immediately switched to another dorm. He didn't even say a word to me about it. I came home from classes one day, and all of his stuff was gone. When Matthew left, all the strange stuff that had been going on in the previous semester started up again. I was willing to deal with the weirdness of the room, because I liked having a double room to myself, for the price of a single room. As a means to cope, I started drinking more. Hey, I was 19 at the time. I learned to ignore it when a weird chill went around the room, or when my favorite sweater would be on my bed instead of in my closet where I had left it, or when I would fall asleep in my bunk bed and hear rustling on the bunk above me, even though it should have been empty. Denial is a beautiful thing. The year eventually started to wind down, and in early April, I wound up getting really drunk at a lacrosse party. And we're talking really drunk, like just short of being hospital drunk. My friends Mason and Ryan walked me home that night, and I remember them helping me get into my bed. and placing a trash can right next to it just in case I got sick. I then fell into a deep, drunken sleep. Suddenly I felt water splash across my face. A guy that I didn't recognize stood over me, holding a water bottle. From what I could make out in the dark, he was a short, stocky guy with blonde hair and brown eyes. He yelled at me that there was a fire and that I needed to get out of the building. Confused as to how he got into my room and still being pretty drunk, I somehow managed to grab my phone and stumble out of the building, with the fire alarm blaring and the sprinklers going off. The guy was right behind me until I lost him in the crowd of residents and RAs who were standing in the parking lot in front of the building, waiting for the fire trucks to arrive. It turned out that some genius in his drunken state tried to set off firecrackers in the common area on the second floor, which started the fire. We were allowed to move back in 2 weeks later, after all the water damage was repaired. When I got back, nothing happened in that dorm for the last 2 weeks. I tried looking for the guy that had woken me up in the dorm, but I couldn't find him anywhere. And eventually the year was over, and I left that dorm for good. Fast forward to about Halloween weekend, 2006. I moved back home and switched to commuting to school because, frankly, I had had enough of the dorm life experience. I made friends with a kid in my drama class named John. John was your typical theater nerd, and we got along pretty well. That Saturday afternoon, we were working together in the library for a test. Given that it was Halloween weekend, John and I started talking about our weird experiences. That's when I mentioned that I had been subjected to weird occurrences at Goldstein Hall. John looked at me dead in the eye and said, "You know that's where a kid died back in the 80s, right? My uncle who went here at the time told me about it." John went on to tell me that in April of 1986, a group of guys who were in a frat decided to set off a smoke bomb inside the common area on the second floor of Goldstein Hall. It started a fire that quickly got out of control, and a student died. He was found in his dorm on the first floor, apparently dying of smoke inhalation while trying to escape. Naturally, the story spooked me, and feeling immensely curious, I asked John if he wanted to look up the yearbook archives that were in the library. He agreed, and we were able to find the 1986 yearbook. I thumbed through the yearbook, and then froze when I found what I knew I was going to find. There was a memorial page to the fire victim, Kevin W. Anderson, born August 15th, 1967, and died April 6th, 1986. The smiling photo of Kevin looked exactly like the guy who had woken me up in my dorm the night of the fire.
He only helped you because he died in a fire. He was like,
When I was 22, I moved 1,000 miles away from my Midwest home to the beautiful foothills of Tennessee. I had a new job, new car, and a nice apartment, but didn't know a soul outside of work. If my phone rang, I expected to hear a faraway family member or my long-distance boyfriend who was still in college. This was a landline, no cell phones yet. Despite being very alone, I was managing well with the excitement of all the new things in my life. I had only lived there about 2 weeks when the unwanted calls started. The first call, a man's friendly voice asked what I was doing. I couldn't place him and thought maybe it was one of my cousins or uncles. I have a huge extended family. I ask him his name, he laughs a little, and his tone gets dark, a bit angry, and he says, "You know exactly who this is, darling." I pause, deciding if this guy simply called the wrong number or is a creep. I choose the former, laugh, and politely tell him he has the wrong number. He then recites my brand new, unlisted, unpublished phone number and my name. What the fuck, I thought. An intense chill races through me. I've only given my new number to my parents, sister, boyfriend, apartment manager, and employer. I'm new to the city in this lovely southern state. He does not like it that I tell him he called the wrong number and starts yelling at me, then tells me in a much calmer voice the many vulgar things he's going to do to me. I hang up and brush it off. He calls again around 1 a.m. I tell him to screw himself and hang up. He keeps calling, so I unplug the phone and return to sleep. However, as days go by, the calls continue and escalate. He starts mentioning personal things about me, said he liked the white quilt on my bed, knew what was in my fridge, that he's allergic to cats, I had one, and then asked me if I was in love with Mary. As I listened to his words, I was standing in my kitchen looking at the calendar taped to the fridge. It had Mary written in pink on the 17th with a heart around it, because Mary is my sister and the 17th is her birthday. I started shaking and crying, because suddenly I realized this creep has been in my apartment. I was alone, with no friends or family to run to for the night. It was me versus a creepy mystery man. I didn't sleep much that night.
Ladies and gents, the goal of life is to be a licensed carrier. That way anything like this happens, won't come in your house, you can defend yourself. That's the only time I feel like it's necessary to be a licensed carrier. If you are living alone, no matter if you are male or female, I feel like it is important to be able to protect yourself. Men get attacked, women get attacked all the time. We have to protect ourselves.
Early the next morning, I talked to the apartment complex manager before heading to work, telling her what had happened and that I want the locks changed that day. She gets a weird look on her face, and after a long pause, says she knows who's been in my apartment and that it won't happen again.
Beep, 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 beep. Immediately start beating that old ass lady up, because he's been calling me since, 2 weeks since I moved up in here, and I tell you and you're like, oh, girl, I'll handle it. No, don't handle nothing. I want to beat you up. I want you to beat him up because I beat you up. Like,
What? I thought to myself. It turns out she had a creepy, rapey maintenance guy who noticed a young woman moving into an apartment alone and that I was his new pet. She had the locks changed immediately and promised that she would personally keep the other key. Although the calls stopped, I was paranoid for a year as I came and went from my apartment because I never even knew what this guy looked like. I moved out the moment my lease was up. Only after thinking about it years later did I realize that her weird expression likely meant that it had happened before. Plus, she didn't even fire him. I regret not calling the cops. I was young and naive.
That's why you put hands on her to the point where she have to call the cops and then you explain to them what happened.
One night in a small American town, a young girl threw a party and invited all of her friends from school. There was a large group of boys and girls, and as the night went on, they began telling scary stories. One boy said he had heard an urban legend about an old graveyard that was located near the girl's house. According to the story, an old woman had been buried in the middle of the cemetery, and there were rumors that she was a witch. They said that if someone stood on a grave at night, she would grab them and drag them down into hell. I would never go near that graveyard after dark, another boy said. You're all a bunch of morons, laughed the girl who owned the house. It's just a silly superstition. I can't believe you take it seriously. The boy who had told the story turned to her and sneered. It's all very well to be brave when you're safe and warm in your own house. I think you'd have a different attitude if you actually went down to the graveyard. It wouldn't make a difference, replied the girl haughtily. Okay, then prove it, said the boy. We'll all go down to the cemetery and wait outside while you go in and stand on the old witch's grave. A grave doesn't scare me, said the girl. I'll do it right now. You'll have to prove you really did it, said the boy. Otherwise, you might chicken out. He took a knife from the kitchen drawer and handed it to her. Stick this knife in the grave, he said. Then we'll know you were there for sure. The group of kids set out for the graveyard, and when they reached the old iron gates, they gathered in a circle. All of them stared at the girl. She tried to pretend she wasn't scared, and she hoped that they didn't see her shivering in fear. With the knife clutched tightly in her hand, the girl walked through the old iron gateway and made her way through the darkened graveyard. In the moonlight, the tombstones and the trees cast strange and unnerving shadows. Eventually, she came to the old woman's grave. There is nothing to be scared of, the girl told herself. It's just a stupid story. Crouching in front of the headstone, she whispered, I'm not afraid of you. Then, she raised the knife above her head and thrust it into the earth. Take that, you old witch, she chuckled. The girl was about to turn and leave when she felt something holding her back. She couldn't move. Something was tugging on the hem of her dress and dragging her down. She was filled with terror and flew into a panic. Help! She cried. She's got me! She's got me! When she didn't come back, her friends began to get worried. After a while, they cautiously entered the graveyard to look for her. They found her sprawled across the old woman's grave. She was dead, and her face was frozen in a silent scream. Without realizing it, she had plunged the knife through the skirt and had pinned herself to the ground. That was what had been holding her. The poor girl had been so terrified that her heart gave in, and she died of fright.
That's sickening.
This is a story of my college days. I lived in a rented house with my roommate, Nancy. She loved to party. On the other hand, I was always a shy girl. Even though we were poles apart, Nancy always cared for me like a big sister. She used to drive away bullies for me, took care of me whenever I felt sick. This is why I could never say to her. I admired her for being kind-hearted, even after being one of the popular girls on the campus. Our house was on the outskirts of the city. There were hardly 10 to 12 houses in our residential area. Nancy and I used to go to college together in her car. The day was 31st October, Halloween. After waking up in the morning, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. Nancy's bedroom was on the left side of the kitchen. After pouring myself a cup of coffee, I went to check on her to see if she had returned or not. Nancy was dating a guy who was a senior. He had a place of his own at 5 to 7 houses down from our place. She often spends the night with him and returns home early. I never had an issue with her staying away at night because this guy was a nice person, so I knew she would be safe. As I turned to head back to my room, Nancy opened the main door and entered the house. The reason I could tell it was her, because Nancy had a habit after coming home. She used to throw her shoes off on the floor, making loud thuds and calling out for me saying, "Katie, I'm home." Hearing her voice put a smile on my face. Nancy rushed towards me and said, "I have the most exciting news for us." I knew this would be about going to a party tonight. Still, to enjoy the excitement on her face, I pretended to be curious. She told me that her boyfriend is throwing a huge party at his house tonight. It's a Halloween costume party, and we both are invited there. I was never a party animal, but there was no way Nancy would have taken a no from me on this. She is crazy about Halloween parties. Anyways, I also wanted to go out and socialize a bit for a change, so I said yes. She really got excited and said we will go for our costume shopping after lunch. Calling off all other plans for one day, Nancy and I rode in her car and went to the city mall. The mall was quite crowded, and the entire decoration was Halloween themed. Almost all the shops had something related to Halloween for their customers. We started to check out the costumes in various shops. After roaming around for about an hour, Nancy and I finally bought our costumes. She wanted to be Harley Quinn and insisted me to buy the Catwoman outfit. I did, and we headed back towards the exit, just when Nancy said she had to pick up some snacks and booze, so we will have to go to the food mart for some time. The food mart was in the basement of the mall, so we got down the stairs. Many boys and girls were already wearing costumes and wandering around the food mart. Everyone seemed busy buying booze for their Halloween party. Nancy told me to wait near the vegetable corner and went to the right side to buy beers. I stood there for 2 to 3 minutes and kept watching everyone in an excited mood. Suddenly, my eyes went to the left corner of the food mart. I noticed a tall guy dressed as the urban legend, the Hookman, standing right after the entrance. His big hoodie over his head kept his entire face in darkness. Being honest, after looking at his hand, I felt kind of creepy. I kept looking at other directions just to understand if he was watching me or not. Every second standing there, I could tell that he was not only watching me, but literally scanning me with his dark hidden eyes. I stood like a statue for 10 minutes, then started to walk towards the alcohol section. I saw Nancy with lots of stuff in her handbasket, standing near the billing queue. She was standing behind two people, so I felt relieved that we will leave soon. I walked towards her and stood beside her. She looked at me and said, "Thank God you came. My hands are so full. Help me." I quickly hid the tension on my face and hold a few packets.
Nope. Always tell your friend what's
My
going
eyes
on.
kept checking every nooks and corner for that guy, but I didn't see him.
Nancy, girl,
I
this
thought he
man
might have
woke
left with
around
his
the corner.
friends, and I overthought the entire scenario. Nancy and I started walking towards the exit after paying the money. As usual, Nancy was talking about the party, and I calmed a bit. Just when we were 9 to 10 hands distance from the exit, I noticed that same guy. He was standing near the exit and watching us walk towards him.
You see, I'm the protective friend, so I'm terrible in these situations because my friend would have definitely came up to me like, T, there's someone mad creepy. He was staring at me, hoodie over his eyes, couldn't even see him with a hook. I didn't even know if he was looking at me, but girl, I had to go. Would have been walking out, she would have been like, look, look. I would have cussed him out. Like, can you leave people alone? I understand it's Halloween, but what are you really doing right now? You're a grown man being creepy. You know, like, it's, if you want to fight, say that. If you don't, be on your way. Happy Halloween, sir. You don't need to be acting like this just because it's Halloween. Come, like, get it together.
I really got freaked out this time, but couldn't say anything to Nancy.
You could have.
We kept walking to the gate, and I understood we are going to walk past him. It was the scariest few seconds of my life when I almost reached close to him. My breath grew denser, and I was out of words. Just the moment when I was about to cross him, I heard his evil laughter. As soon as we got out of the mall, I hopped inside the car. Nancy started the engine and reversed the car to make a U-turn. He was standing near the mall gate. I didn't utter a single word about him to my roommate. I felt she would think I am making up a stupid story. We arrived at our boyfriend's house and started to put up the decorations and prepare ourselves for the party. The entire evening went in
Girl, you
such a
said we
rush
were
that
invited.
I almost
That's how
forgot
we
about
have
this
to work.
incident at the mall. I also told myself that it was some drunk freakhead who tried to spook me in a hookman costume. The party started, and the house got filled with crazy college students. Nancy and I drank beer and joined everyone on the dance floor. The spooky neon lights and yellow-lighted pumpkin heads all around the house set the right mood for the Halloween party. I was actually having fun, but after a few hours, I started to feel really drunk. The lights all around me with the dramatic decorations made my head feel heavier. So, I decided to head back to my place before I end up vomiting and embarrassing myself. I went to Nancy and asked for the house keys. She handed me over the keys, asking, will I be okay to go alone? I didn't want her to miss the party, so I said I will be fine. I also told her that she could stay at her boyfriend's tonight if she wants. She got happier and told me to go home and lock the doors and have a sound sleep. She will come back early and will also fix me some breakfast in bed. She knew I was going to wake up with a hangover. Anyways, I left the party and started to walk down the street. It wasn't a very long walk, but because I was drunk, I walked pretty slowly.
If you have parties at your house, I don't know, in my opinion, I say try to be the person to where it's like if you get too drunk, you can't leave. I do that with all of my parties, every party I've had at my house. I had the rule, even little small get-togethers with friends. If we're over here drinking, playing drinking games, a party. I had a Halloween party before. You can't, not like you can't, but it's, in my opinion, it's your responsibility. You're responsible for everybody. It's your responsibility to make sure everybody gets home safely. If you feel like they're not going to get home safely, hold them hostage. Not even, it's not holding them hostage when they're your friend and you're trying to make sure that they're safe, I used to collect keys, if you're too drunk, I have air mattresses, y'all can sleep in the living room, wake up in the morning, go home, just make sure everybody's safe if you're having parties, please.
I was being careful not to stumble upon a rock and flip on the road. It was 1:30 a.m., hence the streets were completely empty.
By yourself.
There was only the sound of the hollow wind passing by. I was almost near the house just when I heard the sound of a twig snapping behind me. I turned around, but there was no one. I thought, my mind is hallucinating due to too much alcohol in my stomach. I opened the main door with a trembling hand. I got inside the house and locked the door behind me. My head was hurting really bad just when I felt the urge to vomit. I ran towards Nancy's room as it was the closest to the main door. Her room was dark, but the streetlight coming from the window helped me to reach the bathroom. I freshened myself up and decided to go to my room to sleep like a rock. As I opened the door of my room, I saw the window was open. I couldn't remember whether I locked it or not before leaving the house, but knowing myself, I thought I might have. My room was too dark.
You did.
The window was right beside my bed, so I could spot it with the help of the streetlights again. I was in no position to find the switch, so I threw myself over it. I realized the other half of the room was entirely in darkness. I started to take off my shoes just when I felt something move.
I don't know if you see me, I jumped, y'all. That got me.
At first, I wasn't sure of it, but after a while, I saw something pointy and shining in that darkness. My head had no control over my body, so I just sat there for some seconds. Just when I realized I should turn on the light to check what it is, someone knocked on the main door. This time, I got really freaked out. But after a small pause, I heard Nancy's voice. "Katie, open the door!" I felt so relieved to know that she came back, I ran to the main door, leaving the room at the moment. Nancy came in and said, "I thought I shouldn't leave you alone tonight, so I came back. Are you all right?" I hugged her and said, "I just got a bit scared being alone in my room." She replied in a comforting voice that she will sleep in my room tonight. As we walked towards our room, we heard a loud thud outside. After getting into the room, I noticed the window was closed this time. My head couldn't take it anymore. So without paying attention to anything, I immediately lied in my bed and fell asleep.
Y'all could have died because you want to not
If you think
say
the story is over, then let me tell you that the scariest part of the story is yet to come.
We know.
The next morning, when I woke up, I almost had a heart attack. It felt like all my blood had rushed to my face. The wall on the other side of my room freaked me even in that morning light. Someone has wrote on the wall with a sharp, pointy, hook-like object. "Lucky that your roommate came back."
He was about to slice your ass up, and you ain't say nothing.
When I was in high school, I lived in a small town in the Midwest. I worked at a historic, but failing, dual-screen theater. Unfortunately, the building itself was on its last leg, and the interior cosmetic renovations hadn't been made since the mid-'80s, when a wall was built over the original stage and converted into a cinema. However, I adored the building, and was deeply saddened by its decrepit state. Many of the locals didn't care much for the theater once they started showing movies, and business dropped enormously from then to when I was employed there in 2007. Most of my shifts I barely saw more than a dozen people for each showing, if that. Some days we didn't even have a single person come in. My manager and I eventually became good friends, and he gave me a key to perform nightly janitorial duties. Needless to say, I was psyched. I loved the idea of coming in after hours to work and try to make the theater look more presentable, and not a typical smelly discount shithole. I would purchase cleaning supplies myself, and brought my mom's vacuum in because the theater didn't have one. I tried as much as a 17-year-old could to make the place more attractive, because it seemed everyone else gave up on her. One Friday night at around 12 a.m., I decided to borrow my uncle's steam cleaner to clean up the seats in the second theater. It was a lengthy task, but I had just got done smoking a joint with a buddy, and I had no issue finishing my night off listening to music and cleaning with a buzz. I entered the theater as usual and began completing petty tasks before tackling the big job. Eventually, I entered the second theater and experienced a very uneasy feeling. I have never felt uncomfortable in there before, but for some reason I couldn't shake this pressing feeling on my chest. I assumed I was a little panicky from the pot. I turned my music down and started getting to work to try and get my mind off it. I had my back facing the screen and was scrubbing the second to last row near the exit when I suddenly heard a lot of rustling coming from behind the screen. This didn't come as much of a shock, considering that we've had pest issues in some of the storage rooms behind the screens. Thinking it was a raccoon trying to hide after hearing the drowning noise of my steam cleaner, I continued on and didn't pay much mind to it, until the rustling
Please
became
be
very
aware of your
distinct.
surroundings.
Whatever the noise was coming from under the screen inside the large metal grate that leads to the stage behind the screen, and whatever it was big. I turned my cleaner off and stared at the grate, practically frozen in fear and continuing to reassure myself that it was a raccoon or maybe even a dog or something. The noise became more prominent, and after what seemed like hours of me just staring at the grate, trying to determine what the creature was, the metal grate made a slow and ominous screeching noise as it began to push out from the inside. I continued to stare in intense fear as I witnessed what came tumbling out. A nearly bald head with a couple of strands of gray, dirty hair greeted me before an old naked woman, absolutely covered
And
in
she's
dirt,
naked?
insects, and blood, came
Oh,
crawling
hell
out on
no.
all fours and
That
looked
looks so
directly at
scary.
me. She paused as she was fully out
I would have
and
threw the
forcefully
steam cleaner
grinning
at
at
her.
me with her toothless mouth. I'm not sure how much time went by, but I honestly felt like my feet had melted into the floor. I truly thought I was hallucinating. The way she was positioned
The
like
phrase
that
is
seemed
fight
unreal,
or flight,
and although I was
not fight,
terrified,
flight,
I
or
think I was more
freeze.
perplexed by her contour. I thought she was a character from Silent Hill I had hallucinated, and
Period.
that I was tripping on some really bad weed. This is what was playing
That would
over
have
and
been really
over
good
again in
weed
my
if you're
mind,
tripping seeing a naked
until she started
lady.
crawling very quickly towards me without saying a single word, maintaining her grin with her head cocked back and her sagging breasts bouncing back and forth, hitting her bloody arms and smearing dirt and blood together. At that moment I pissed myself and jumped over the last 2
You
rows of
pissing?
seats. I still can't believe I did that in one leap, and ran as fast as I could to the exit door. I could hear distant shuffling as I slammed the door behind me, locked it, and ran to the police station, which was a couple of buildings away. I gave them the key, called my manager, and told them I wasn't going back.
Ever.
The woman who crawled after me, according to the police, was a homeless schizophrenic meth addict who decided to take up residency under the screen
That's a
after
lie.
managing to enter through a small opening from the outside of the
Homeless,
building.
schizophrenic,
When they
and
arrived,
you're a drug
she was crawling around in circles in the lobby. It appeared to them that she had been staying there for at least a week to shoot up meth, and she more than likely watched me on my janitor days, grinning that toothless grin as I swept away, unaware of her being there. It was definitely the absolute
Please don't
scariest
hit
moment
you.
of my life, and needless to say, I stopped coming in by myself to clean up. Since then, the place has
Stop
closed
coming in.
and is
Period.
completely boarded up. I miss it greatly, but whenever I come back to the area, I still wonder if she's sleeping in there.
Matthew was all set to go out party hard tonight. He called his best friend Rita and said, "Hey, excited for New Year's Eve? What are we all doing tonight?" With that same excitement in her voice, Rita replied, "Of course. I have told
Okay,
everyone
Rita.
to arrive at 10 p.m. sharp at the club. I will text you the address as well. Don't be late, dumbass." She chuckled and disconnected the phone. Within 2 minutes, a text
10
popped
p.m.
up
I'm
in
coming in at
Matthew's phone.
10:30.
IMR Club, 2021, Subscribe Street, 10 p.m. Matthew looked at the clock. It was 8:30 already. He finished his coffee and ran to the washroom to get ready. Matthew lives in his apartment alone. His parents stay in Texas. 3 years earlier, he shifted to New York and started his career here. Don't know why, but
Looks like he
Matthew
ain't got no
loves New
hair.
York. He feels so normal while walking down these streets. This city is always busy, and now due to New Year, it has turned even more glamorous. The roads are decorated with bright lights, stars, Happy New Year.
You guys remember when 2021 started? That crazy of a year? We're about to be 2023, guys. We have a few weeks and we'll be entering 2023. Comment something you would love to accomplish before 2023. before 2023, I can say I would love to become more consistent on all of my platforms because I be playing. So before 2023, I would just like to have in my mind a good schedule of recording and uploading. Ugh, we're about to be going into 2023. This year was definitely a flash. Mind blowing, guys. Mind blowing.
Your banners. People are looking at their best, and every nightclub, pub, restaurant is filled with their crackles of joy and laughter. IMR Club is nearly 15 minutes drive from his house. Matthew has been to this club many times. Rita and Matthew often go there.
Look at old girl that died in the other one. I wonder if this was before or after she went to that cemetery
Matthew has
with her
been to
friends.
this club many times. Rita and Matthew often go there to grab a drink after a long, tiring week at work.
Look at her.
The streets are covered with white snow, and blinking decorations appeared like a dream to Matthew. He stood near the wide dining hall while combing his hair. His phone rang suddenly, and he snapped out of his thoughts. It was his mother. He answered the call. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" His mother spoke from the other side. "Happy New Year in advance, honey. Don't get too drunk." Matthew laughed and replied, "Come on, Mom. Also, it's still the 31st of December. He talked to her for a while and noticed it was 9:30. Matthew ended the call with his mom and hopped inside his car. While driving to the club, crowds of people could be seen cheering on the streets. Matthew parked his car near the club and saw his friends standing in front of the club and waiting for him. He went to them, and everyone got super excited. Matthew was about to enter the club with them just when his eyes went to the dark corner at his left. A man was sitting in the corner, hiding his face into his knees.
It's naked?
He figured out that there's a small, dingy alley lying in that corner. Suddenly, he lifted up his face and looked at the sky. His face looked heavily scarred. He then looked at Matthew and smiled with his crooked tooth and heavily scarred face. There was something in his smile that made Matthew's heart crawl into his throat. Rita came to him and said, "What happened? Let's go." Matthew shrugged off, saying nothing, and went inside the club to party on New Year's Eve.
Y'all saying nothing.
With the sound of joy and laughter, a group of young people celebrated New Year's Eve at IMR Club, and at 12 p.m., they all wished each other a very happy New Year. Around 1 o'clock, we all got up to leave. Matthew wished Rita good night and came out of the club looking for his car. The streets were still brimming with people celebrating the new year. He took out the keys and approached the car. Matthew noticed that he has forgotten to lock the car earlier, but he was too drunk to stand there and regret his mistake. He got inside and started the car. Rita yelled at him while standing at the entrance of the club. "Matt, you sure you can drive?" Matthew said with a smile, "Yeah, don't worry. I will reach home in 15-20 minutes max." He then waved his friends goodbye and drove away. The streets were filled with people, and he was driving slow just to be safe from his side. After 5 minutes, he took a left turn, and his eyes went on the back view mirror. As he looked onto it, Matthew's blood turned cold. He saw someone was sitting in the back seat. He couldn't see the man's face, but he could see his creepy, wide eyes watching Matthew from the dark. For a second, Matthew was numb and terrified. But then he thought, "I'm already hell drunk. There's no way I can fight this guy and drive the car at the same time." So he decided to be rational about the situation. Matthew asked in a scared voice, hello, do you need to go somewhere?" The man laughed in a very bizarre way and said, "I thought you wouldn't even notice me." Matthew was sure that this man's only...
I would have been so mad. I'm in the car scared, and you're over here. Ha ha ha. I didn't even think you would see me back here. Like, get out. Tuck and roll out my car right now, please, and thank you. Playing with me.
Intention is to rob him. So, without wasting any more seconds, he said, "Look, man, if you want, you can take my wallet and leave. I won't even fight you. Just please leave my car. I don't want any problem tonight." The man screamed at the top of his lungs and said, "I am not some fucking beggar. Is that how you treat people in New Year? Keep driving or I will slice your throat with my sharp knife."
Mm.
The man then came forward, and Matthew recognized his face in a flash. It was that
Well, you
same
should have
homeless
just
guy
crashed the
near
car.
the club. He could see his face clearly now. His eyes were bursting out. There was something unusual about his pupils. They weren't like the pupils of humans. Instead, looked more like cats or a completely different creature. The guy told in the same spine-chilling voice, "Keep driving the car. There will be a right turn ahead. Take that turn. Do as I say, or this will be the last new year of your life." Matthew had no other option but to listen to this man. He had no idea if the man really had a knife with him or not, but there was no way he's taking the risk. After 7 minutes of driving, the right turn came. As Matthew took the right turn, they got onto an empty road. There was hardly any car on that road. It was like an adjacent lane to the highway. The roads looked very spooky, surrounded by bushy trees on the sides. There was hardly any light, except headlights of Matthew's car on the road. After driving
Look
like
at
this
this
for 5 minutes
man,
more, something unexpected
naked and
happened.
wrinkly in his
The
backseat.
man on the back seat started to cough terribly. Matthew noticed his eyes were turning even more wide as his
Are you
tongue came out of his
dying in my
mouth.
backseat?
The man had a really big tongue, which creeped the hell out of Matthew. He realized there was something very wrong with this guy. Suddenly, the man told in a choking voice, "Stop. Stop the car now." Out of fear, Matthew immediately stopped the car. The man got out of his car while coughing terribly. It felt like he couldn't breathe. Matthew sat inside the car, being
Someone just broke into your car. Creepy. Creepy as hell. Look at them. Just told you they're gonna slit your throat if you don't do what they say. They start dying in your backseat till you pull over. You pull over, get out, choking, wheezing. You're CPR certified. Do you get out your car, help him? Who's just about to kill you in your backseat. Scary. Meanwhile, it's about to go into New Year's. This could be your good karma for the year. This could be your bad karma for the year. Would it be bad karma because he was about to kill you? But still, are you saving his life or are you not saving his life? I don't think I'd save him. He was just about to kill me. I was tipsy. I'm one of those people that, if I'm drunk and something, hectic happens, my buzz is gone. So now my buzz is gone. I just had a good buzz going into the new year. Now you done knocked my buzz off, about to kill me, heart racing. Once I pulled over, he got out. I'm speeding off, so I'm not even going to know if he's alive or not, So that's going to be my excuse for me still getting my good karma. I don't even know if he's dead or alive because he tried to kill me. I drove him down the street. That's where he wanted to go. I did my good deed. What would you do? Let me know.
numb. He didn't know what to do. He thought to drive back and get the hell away from this man as soon as possible, but something didn't let him. He sat in the car, staring at this man's unusual behavior. The man crawled on the road and came right in front of Matthew's car. The headlights were falling on him. What happened next terrified Matthew for his entire life. As the man choked to death, suddenly his bones started to crack on his own. He sat down on the highway while screaming like a creature from another world. The sound of his bones creaking fucked up Matthew's mind completely. He was already in a
I would
state
have
of
never seen
trance
that. I
due
would
to
have
the
left.
alcohol. Now the sound of choking mixed with the bones cracking felt like a living nightmare.
I would have already been gone.
Matthew kept staring at this guy and slowly realized that the horror is yet to come. After a few seconds like this, the man suddenly got up and started to tear his own skin from his body. The way he was tearing off his skin made it seem like he was wearing a costume. He threw patches of skin, soaked in blood, here and there while screaming in pain. Matthew couldn't believe what he was witnessing.
Why are
He
you
knew
still
he wasn't that
watching,
drunk to
Matthew?
imagine all this shit. After taking the entire skin off, the man turned at the car and looked at Matthew. A horrifying human
I would've
figure
hit his
was
ass with the
standing
car.
in the middle of the road. There was not a single piece of skin on his body. The veins and red flesh gushing out of this vicious creature.
Because you gotta
Matthew was
back
breathing
up,
heavily.
hit him again, run
He
him
felt like his
over.
heart would stop
Gotta do
right
it a few
now.
times.
The man again stared
But
at the
again, I would have
sky
been gone.
and
I'm not
said in the
seeing none of
scariest
this.
voice ever heard by human ears, "It's time to get a new skin. You just turned lucky, as this time I'm going to pick a woman. Happy New Year, Matt." The creature laughed in a demonic voice and hopped into the jungle like a four-legged animal and disappeared into the darkness of the woods. Matthew rushed his car way back home. He didn't talk, didn't come out for an entire week. He left New York after a month and came back to his hometown.
As he should.
One night, he was reading an
After
article
a month, I
on
would
Greek
have left that
mythology,
day,
which made a
leaving
truly
everything.
terrifying revelation. Greek people believe in a demon who is said to be a shapeshifter, or sometimes a skinwalker. These demons are said to acquire any creature's skin or shape to hide in the human world. Matthew knows these are just some old scary folklores, but how can he ever tell anyone that this New Year's Eve he actually came across a skinwalker? He prays to God that he never sees
Put
that
your tongue in
creature
your
again
mouth.
in his entire life.
Okay, I'm gonna end it here. So, which one was your favorite? Honestly, my favorite was probably in between that. Story 14 that we seen, and I want to say it was story 13. No, not story 13. Story 11 with the old girl in the Halloween party, and just because the way he darted across her bedroom, it made me jump, and that's the first jump I got from this. So, like I said, I'm gonna try to finish the 16 hours. Gonna be doing an hour, each time watching it. I think this was an hour or just right under it. Like, comment, and subscribe, please, and thank you. Let me know what you thought of this video. Comment, let me know what I could do better next time. Answer the questions I asked throughout the video. If you like the video, please share it. You can follow me on my other platforms. I'll mention a few in the description below. I enjoyed this one. This was a good hour. If you want to watch the prior video that I did, just again look for it in the playlist. And have a great day. It's the beginning of the week. Let's have a good week, Bye.